Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our Leadership Now communication section. Thank you for joining us. And we know that communication is just the roadblock to so many situations which can occur with people that we are working with internally as well as externally. So it is something that we really need to have some in-depth conversation about and to see where within our own communication we might be stumbling to understand ourselves better, to understand how we can become more effective in this area of leadership. And then also, when we are leading and guiding others, the tools and techniques that we can partake in sharing and helping to develop them. All right, so we're going to talk about a practical model of communication today, something that hopefully you will hear some things that we'll be familiar with, but I also would like for you to be open enough to really have some insight into the areas where you feel as if you need some more developing on. And communication is not something that once you have it, you have it. It's constantly evolving because the other factor in communication is the people that we're working with and the experiences they have and what they bring to the table. So to say we are effective at communication is something that is not just acquired, but it's something that needs constant day in and day out reminders of how to be the best that we can be with our communication style and our communication relationships that we have with people. The first area, the first model that we're going to look at is active listening. Again, it's not something that we're born with. Yes, we're born with the ability to hear, but that does not mean we're born with the abilities to be effective in our listening skills. There's so many things going on when we're trying to listen to a message that somebody has given us. We live in a highly distractible world. We have technology coming at us right and left. People are constantly pulling us in different directions and needing different things. So to say, how can you fully 100% be actively listening to someone? It's very challenging. I'm not sure, if that is practical or not, but some other reasons why it becomes so difficult, past associations, with that person, with a situation, clouds our abilities to actively listen because we jump in with wanting to solve or we jump in with these past experiences and then judge a situation without being able to actively listen to what that person is trying to tell us. So the past associations are a strong barrier to our abilities to actively listen, and we need to be aware of that. Again, those assumptions that we might have when a person comes to us or a situation comes up, assumptions based on the past experiences, not based off of what that situation is telling us. So unfounded assumptions. Jump in the gun, if you would. I find that that's oftentimes what what we go to, is we jump the gun trying to solve quicker than waiting, listening, and solving it more effectively the first time. Hot buttons are something we are all going to carry around, and I think it's just very important for us to be aware of what our own hot buttons are. When I talk about strengths, I think that one area of our hot buttons is really when we're working with people that have different strengths than our own and that communicate differently. So, for instance, if you're working with somebody that is more analytical, they take more time and they deliberate more on information and they don't just jump into a conversation. And so if you are someone that is a high-level activator and you are someone that is a get up and go and conversations and communications are fast and need information and need to know what the next step is, if you're working with someone that's analytical, that could be one of your hot buttons because these people don't activate fast. They want to stop and think about it. When they deliver their message, they deliver it in a slower pace, if you would, and they deliver it with details and thoughts. They may not have the resolution piece of it. They are laying the groundwork, and it sometimes takes a person that is an activator, go-getter, let's get it done, it takes that person really has to put the brakes on and be able to know they're talking with an analytical, with a thinker, with a process person, and they need to put the brakes on their the information that is coming at them, where they're trying to jump in and resolve it, because you are going to then jump in and not hear the total message. And hot buttons, could be our experiences with those people. How has it gone in the past, and this person, maybe this person pushes buttons for you for whatever reason. And to be aware of that, because that is going to cloud our abilities then to effectively listen and speak to be understood. Passive listening, we do it and we say, no, we're listening, but really, how many other channels do you have going on in your head? How many other messages are you thinking about and receiving and processing in your head while this person is taking a long time to get to their point? So that passive listening, and also, what breaks down relationships is when people feel as if they're not being heard. And when we are passively listening, oftentimes then the person is aware of what our nonverbals are. So even though we might be nodding our head and think that we're communicating, listening, there are so many other areas that you're being judged on. And so the passive listening, even though you feel as if that person doesn't know, the nonverbals come through, and they get that you're not really there in the room with them, really listening to what they have to say. So be careful about that. And really, when we value the relationships and value what we're doing and working with and through people, we don't want to be passive listeners, because that is going to damage that relationship. That person's just going to get the message that you really don't care. And although that may not be your intent, that could be the impact. Selective hearing, I think that we get fixated into a mentality of solving things the way in which we've solved things in the past. Therefore, we listen for the things that we know how to solve. And selective hearing is one of those things where we pull pieces of a puzzle away from a message that's coming to us, and then we try to solve that puzzle. Well, it cannot be solved because you don't have all those pieces. So the selective hearing is something that we fall short to, and we jump into this fixedness mentality that we need to step back from and make sure we're not going there and trying to solve things without all the pieces to the puzzle, because you're truly not going to be able to. So these are just a few of the characteristics as to why listening can be so difficult. And I know maybe you have some of these, if not all of these, at one time or another. And thinking about, I always like to think about communications experiences where, they did not go well. And then I make sure I activate as a leader to say, all right, where is it I fell short? Had I already jumped the gun when they came to me with this situation? Had I already thought about solving it before I actually got all the pieces? This person really is like nails on a chalkboard for me. I just kind of get aggravated as soon as I see or hear their voice, and so therefore I kind of tune them out until the end. I mean, where is it, what was your part in a communication gone bad is what we always need to be thinking about. What is in my control, and where is it I fell short, and what can I do better next time, or how do I rectify it now to move it forward? And the mixed emotions, we may look at the person and we may see a body language and then the verbal message, and we may see that maybe we don't judge the nonverbals accordingly. Maybe we don't judge the vocal tone accordingly. Maybe we're just going right for the facts and avoiding the emotion, and therefore we're not truly understanding the impact. And so we got to kind of do a check and balances with the emotion that is we are perceiving that's coming to us. So it's not just the verbal. We also have to know that we are also in check with what is the emotion behind the verbal message, and asking that person and having a conversation to make sure we're getting the whole, we're understanding the whole message, the emotions of the message, the facts of the message, and the expectation of the message. And listening involves 3 areas. So we are first receiving the information. And unfortunately, not unlike technology, you're trying to receive one message, and then, you're getting all these other messages coming at you. And so you're receiving, you're processing, and trying to respond. And it's like constant. And so we need to hopefully be able to tune off those other channels that are flying in at you, receive the message in its entirety, then process it in your mind and think about it, and making sure, going through your checks and balances, and then respond. We'll go through the fact that oftentimes there might be pauses in a long message, so you can receive one bit, process, and then give back some information, receive another bit, and do the same, depending on how long the interaction is. So listening is not just listening, it's listening, process, responding, a check and balance, if you would, to make sure you're both on the right page and that the conversation is moving ahead with, the process of problem solving, or whatever the expectation of the message is, that you guys are on the right page by looking at this 3-step process. Active listening involves 6 areas that we are going to talk about today. Opening the door, echoing what you hear, probing the message for more content, reflecting emotions, paraphrasing. Gosh, that's a skill, man. That's hard, I tell you. It's something I'm always trying to work on, especially as a coach, is making sure my paraphrasing are not disrespectful, make sure they're getting to the point, make sure I'm in line. Something that always has to be polished up. And then concluding with the final transmission of what's going on, what's the next step. So let's look at, as an active listening process, this first area, opening the door, really involves your nonverbals. It does involve physically attempting to show the person that you are open to receive the information. So facing the person, making sure we're having good, pleasant eye contact, stepping a little bit closer but not too close, looking interested and smiling. So really stopping what you're doing, turning and facing the person, and really being open to the conversation. I think we do get so super busy that when someone comes into the office, we might be on the computer, our backs might be turned, and we just start nodding as that person starts talking. Now, on both sides, there is an error there, right? The person coming in who needs to have a conversation needs to stop and wait until you are able to resolve what you're doing. You get to a stopping point, you turn around, and then are able to move it forward. So that person, makes an error off the gates by just beginning to speak when you're in the middle of something. The error, if you're on the computer side of it, is the fact someone comes in and sometimes what we do is an automatic. We wave them in like, yep, and we begin the head nodding, and that person then thinks you're ready to receive the message. Non-verbally, we probably need to allow them to know, wait a second, let me finish what I'm doing, and then be able to turn and be fully there for them. So the nonverbals are going to be very important in this situation, and making sure that you're able to fully stop what you're doing, and it is a good time to hear the message. Now, if it's not a good time, that's absolutely honest, and they need to know that. They'd rather know that than you be passive in your listening. So be okay with that, especially if you're under a deadline, you've got a million things coming on down your road, and you just, right now is not a good time. It's okay to be able to say that. It's professional, and so get comfortable doing so. Now, verbally, when we are opening the door to that conversation, you've done the nonverbals, and now you are ready to say, how can I help you? What's going on? And then allow them to literally, give and send the message to you. And my biggest thing with communication is distraction. So if there are a lot of environmental distractions, whether it be the sound from the emails popping up, whether it be your phone reminders, whether it be the noise of the office, whatever you can do to minimize that in opening the door so that you can fully give this person your attention is, again, the professional thing to do and where we want to go. So whatever verbal open door conversations, however you open it up, that's kind of your go-to. That gives them the heads up that, hey, let's start the conversation. When the person begins to deliver it, and you might be then processing what's going on, you want to echo back to them what you are hearing with utilizing their key words, and then waiting patiently to see if you are on the right page with them. So for instance, if someone comes in and they're saying that they're very frustrated, the fact that they can't resolve an issue and they've tried it by doing A, B, and C, you might echo back that it sounds really frustrated because you've gone through these steps and it's not helping. Am I correct? Are we on the right page? Am I on the right page? And then stopping. Don't jump in to solve it, but stopping and making sure that they have, yes, I'm very frustrated. Gosh darn it, I've been doing this for the last 2 hours. Let them get some of that emotion off of their plate too, and then move into the next step. Remember that probing the message after you're waiting patiently, and maybe then they say, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Then you want to stop and let them respond. Give them that opportunity to say, no, this is where I was going. And then don't interrupt if you're not understanding at this point. After they've tried to clarify, ask some of these open-ended questions. Ask the ones that are more than a yes or a no. Ask the ones that give more information. Tell me more about this. Or how did you go about doing this? What is it you need from me? How is it I can help? All of these kind of starter phrases probe a message and allows that person to think and share more information with you, for you guys to get on the right page, for you guys to get to a point where you're figuring out what has to happen next. So, open-ended questions are great for the process of probing. That is what you absolutely need to get more information. If that is the need of that conversation in order to find a resolution, then use these open-ended questions. And I think it's just really hard to be patient, which being patient to me is waiting for them to get it out in however they need to be able to get it out without jumping the gun or leading the person in one direction or another. And to be patient means sometimes just to be silent, but then not to go to a different place in your mind and be passive. It's meaning to be present, but patient and quiet, and not to lead. It is a skill. It's just not easy. It does not come to us naturally. It is something we have to be practicing. We may not always do well, but we have to be aware of how we can do it better, and these are some things. And keeping your tone of voice as non-judgmental as possible, because, I tell you, it's certainly easy to show our aggravation or frustration through our tone of voice, and maybe us not even being aware of that. So your tone of voice is going to be very important to just try to keep it as calm and steady as possible. When a person comes to us and they might be frustrated, they might be anxious, their tone of voice might show that, right? It's going to be very rushed. It's going to be very fast. They could be skipping around in their thought processes. And we want to calm them down by keeping our own voice calm and non-judgmental. We don't want to jump into their fire. They're coming to you to help resolve or to help get an understanding of what to do. So, you know, the first thing we need to do is to calm them down, and it's to use our tone of voice as a mechanism as to how we can do this. So be aware of what your tone is, be aware of when you get excited or anxious or nervous or afraid. What does your tone do? Personally, my speech begins to go very fast. Communication being one of my strengths. And remember, the balconies and the basements, sometimes when I'm under the gun or stressed or anxious, my tone of communication might go faster. It might go with a little bit more, you know, sternness in it to try to get my point across. And I need to be aware of that, because if it's not even my issue, but someone's coming to me for help, but I have a hot button about it, or I'm getting anxious or frustrated with the fact they're not getting it, that's when I know that that's going to happen. So I need to be aware of that, and I need to be able to keep that in check so that I don't violate the person, or the person does not get offended by something that I say or do. And reflecting emotion, you know, you hear it both ways. It's, you know, that let's just get the job done. Don't worry about the emotional aspect of the person. But, you know, we come to work and we have relationships at work, and I'm sorry, whenever there is a problem, hopefully you have the people where their heart and soul is in this job, or it's in what they're doing. So you will have emotion, because personally, if I'm not invested emotionally, psychologically, and mentally in a job, I'm probably not totally engaged in that job. So emotions are going to come along with the package. And we just have to get comfortable with the fact that sometimes there's going to be emotions that, you know, we don't want to deal with, but we need to be aware of, and so that we can not damage the relationship. And oftentimes people are going to be coming to you with their crisis already in their head. And it's not necessarily your crisis, but sometimes we make it our crisis. So to lead others and to be aware of how to keep your emotions in check, recognize the fact that everybody's situation is not yours. You don't have to get wrapped up into it, but then also don't get defensive about it. Try to keep it on a playing field that is, you know, resourceful, and that does not involve a lot of emotional turmoil. So when someone comes and they do have a lot of emotion and what's going on, making sure you're saying, okay, so you are feeling this way, or you are saying this. State what you perceive by using the word you, not another person, not a third person, but you. That brings it back to them. And it's, you know, yes, that is exactly what I am feeling, or I am trying to state, because then I take ownership of it. And I'm not asking you to take ownership. I am taking ownership, but you put that back onto them when you do use that word you, and you're able to state effectively what you're sensing from what's going on with that person. And it's not to say, you know, one thing that in the clinical world they say is that we don't want to say, I understand what you're feeling. Especially because if it's in the beginning, or maybe you don't know this person very well, that undermines what they are actually going through, because then they might come back with, well, how do you know what I'm feeling? And so try to not say that phrase if you can. And if you do say it, just correct it. Say, well, you know, I haven't gone through what you have been going through, but I'm sensing how you're feeling. And I might have been in a similar situation where I had that same emotion. So if you do say it and you catch yourself saying it, it's okay, but just make sure you go back and you rectify it so that that person's understanding the intent of why you just said that. Paraphrasing the message, what's happening here is that we are wanting to make sure, again, not unlike reflecting and not unlike probing, that you're getting what they are giving to you. So what you're saying is this. In other words, these are some good starter phrases of how we paraphrase. And there's not a true rule of thumb on when to paraphrase, but in my coaching, I think I try to stop people when I have a lot of information, and oftentimes they might give me signals by breathing or pausing. And if it's a pause where they're trying to think about their next step, that's all right. If you haven't recently paraphrased, might be a good time to paraphrase. So, try to think about that. And if you paraphrase too early, the only thing that happens there is just the fact that it might stop the conversation. It might not get everything out. So probing is what you want to do in the beginning. Paraphrasing maybe in the middle and or a little bit further along in the conversation. And I use it periodically, especially if it is in an hour conversation. If we're having meetings, this is great to make sure that we're all staying on board and then keeping the conversation moving forward as well. And then concluding just with, is there anything else I can do? My reception in concluding is the fact that I like to say, all right, so this is what I'm understanding. These are the next step. This is the expectation I have for you, and this is the expectation that you have for me. And then our next meeting is going to be this time, or the next step is this. But I always like to make sure I am saying that, is there anything else you need from me? Is there anything I'm missing? Are we on the same page? And then follow that up with an email if that's appropriate, or something in writing. Keeping yourself notes to hold yourself accountable is a good rule of thumb. So is there anything else? Is there anything else you need from me? Is there anything else you want to talk about today? That is a good conclusion, and hopefully, if both parties are on the same plane, then you guys are probably going to walk away from that communication feeling as if it was effective and a resource for both of you. The second area of communication model is then speaking to be understood. Are you effective in your communication? When you do speak, do people understand, and do they get it? Or oftentimes, are there barriers in this area for you? And so speaking to be understood, the first thing is, really thinking before you speak, putting your foot in your mouth. I know we've all done it. We will continue to do it, but is there a way to slow down that foot coming in by thinking when people are laying out information and not jumping the gun and doing those things we talked about in active listening that has a negative impact on that communication or that relationship? Thinking before speaking, really, and I see it often, especially where hot buttons or past experiences come into play, that we jump the gun. And again, if you are more of a fast moving person, this is an area that is harder for you. Pursuing the correct goal, and always the correct goal is to do no harm in a communication. Always our intent should be teamwork. Our attempt should be effective communication with goals of effective resolution and making sure we do no harm. And that is the correct goal for all of us. I don't think any of us start out with the intent to cause harm, but sometimes it might happen. And so we want to make sure that our goal, even going into a conversation we might not be comfortable with, is to still do no harm, and to make sure that even though it might be an uncomfortable situation, the end goal is what we're going to look for, and maybe one party's not going to be happy, maybe both parties are not going to be happy, but what is the best in a given situation. So remember that that's the correct goal, is to do no harm, even when the information may not be comfortable, and it might be, emotionally charged. Again, we just want to think first. We'd go in with the intent to do no harm, but we do need to have this conversation. Paying attention to your tone of voice when you are communicating. especially if you know it's an area of vulnerability for you. Again, whether or not it's a bad past experience with the person, hot buttons on a chronic situation gone bad, you know, missing emotion, whatever. So paying attention to your tone of voice is what's in your control. And making sure that you can also do tone of voice checks with people, your mentors or your managers, and have conversations about how does your tone of voice come across. You know, I used to work with somebody that had a very quiet tone, and she was more of a passive individual, so her tone was quieter, and sometimes that quiet tone was perceived as uninterested. You know, she didn't have a lot of reflection, so it was hard to read her emotion. It seemed as if she was just kind of this I don't know how you'd put it, but just very, you know, straight, like one level to her emotion. And so it was hard to say if she was upset or if she was happy, because it never seemed to change. You know, it's just one tone to how she communicated. And that needed to be brought to her attention too. Now, maybe it's something she can't change, but if she brings it out and communicates about it to people that she works with, it's important for us to know that. It's not that I'm disinterested. It's not that I'm disengaged. This is how I communicate. So, you know, checks and balances there. Have those conversations. Bring it out if this is you. If you are someone that has a lot of emotion and you go over the top, people will begin to learn that about you, but it is also good for them to know what is happening. So you bring it out. Let them know, this is how I operate, and I don't want to violate our relationship, and I do get super excited and my tone goes up, and you know, I just want to apologize. I don't want to violate. I don't want to do harm. I'll try to keep it in check, but you know, I do get excited, and this is what happens. So being aware of what your tone of voice is, having conversations, knowing you know, knowing how to modify your tone of voice when that is necessary in a communication. Using positive language, you know, if it goes back to the pursuit of the correct goal, which is to do no harm, then it means that we go into a conversation always with the utilization of positive language. And positive language, what I'm meaning by positive language is just with the, you know, let's work on this together. I want to share this with you in hopes that I get your opinion. I value your opinion. The positive output that you're giving to them. It's not to constantly put a negative on a situation. You know, you don't go into a conversation by saying, well, everything that's gone wrong. You know, we go into a conversation with, this is what's going on, and I need your help. Can you give me some of your insights? You know, so positive language, positive words, positivity, and a positive outlook is not, like we've talked about before, it's not a Pollyanna or anything like that. It's not, you know, a cheerleader out there just with going rah-rah. It's truly with the positive language is part of the message that comes across is to help resolve situations. It's on a positive, you know, with positive intent. It is to look at a problem and not just see it for its obstacles, but opportunities. And that's the positive intent. How is it we can take away from a bad situation? We can learn from this failure and learn to grow forward as a result of it. So that positive intent in language is what we always want to be going with. How do we do that with our positive intent is those I statements I was saying in the beginning, that, you know, I have a problem and I need your help. You know, I've been working on this and I'm not sure where to go. I'm trying to get this accomplished. I'm specific about what, you know, I need to have happened or see changed, but maybe I can't do it alone. And then show, you know, again, putting it out there and exposing what you need in a positive way without pointing fingers, without that blaming of others, you know, this is what's going on and I need your help. And that's a positive message we want to send across. You know, I could say I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated with the fact that the deadlines were not met like we had laid out. And so I'm frustrated because now the client is upset. So I need your help. I need for us to figure out how this is not going to happen again. We cannot let this happen again. So what can we do? How can we more effectively communicate to make sure that this does not happen again? Bad situation, turned it around to make sure we are achieving growth. We are achieving you know, better communication in the future and working with a lot less defensive language. And that word is very important because that defensive language brings out negative impact in regards to communication. You know, the defensive language of claiming that, you know, you should have done this, or pointing the fingers at, you know, what everybody else around me should have done rather than me taking responsibility. And sometimes you're going to say it's not fair. Well, it's not always fair, but to let you know professionally, that's what, again, is in my control, is I understand the situation went bad. This was how I might have contributed to it. And now I need to know what we need to do together to make this happen and to resolve it. And again, staying flexible, and when conversations go bad, to be able to go back to that person and clarify, you know, hey, we walked away and I don't think that situation or our conversation ended very well. I really feel as if we need to go back and revisit it if that's okay with you. Staying flexible, staying open for people then also to come to you and say that same thing and you not become defensive. Maybe you thought it went great, but this person walked away and did not have the same message, didn't receive the same impact that you did. Now they're coming to you to rectify it, and that's very important then for you then to stay flexible as well when the shoe is on the other foot. And we talked about a little bit about defensive language, negative language. We also have a punishment paradox that I think we fall into and we have created, that when communication has gone wrong, oftentimes we look at pointing fingers or blaming that other person. No, you know, we want to say I effectively communicated. I know that that person received it. That person they should have done something differently. Not my fault. I know we've all been there. Let's be honest, you know, and that human nature is to defend ourselves, right? So we want to avoid that as much as possible. There are ways to work through these nasty quirks without blaming, without causing conflict, because our goal is always resolution and productive outcomes, problem solving, positive impact. And the punishment paradox, we try to punish before attempting to resolve it. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you've done this. How could you have missed the target here? This is all your fault. Or punish rather than attempting to resolve the issue. You know, I'm done. This is your fault. The ball's in your court. I'm out of here. I'm stepping back. So this is what happens when we are not good communicators, when we're not good leaders, and when we are breaking down relationships and not being effective in our jobs. This punishment paradox is very vital for us to stay away from. And I'll give you an example of what happens to us, is that we jump into what we call the psychological law of the traps of the should. We feel better about ourselves when we say somebody else should have done this. Why is it my fault? That should have been done by 3 o'clock. It is now 3:30. That should have been done. When we use the word should, it is a psychological law of punishment. And people, we do it all the time. We should on everybody. And there are many other cousins to the should. You know, this ought to have been done, or this must have been done and you didn't, and or, you know, those other words that are pointing fingers that make that person feel as if the blame is on them, they've shifted the finger to them, to another person. So the trap of the should. You know, you should have been on time. The meeting started at 8:30. It's 8:45. Yes, I should have been on time. But human beings don't respond well to that. You know, when people start doing that, then I start the meeting, even though I'm 10 minutes late, justifiably so, got in traffic jam, got it, whatever the reason is, right? Yes, I should have been there at 8:30. However, these things came up. Well, when somebody says that, automatically my defenses go up. Automatically communication is compromised. And we don't respond well to it. And we become angry right away. So we want to stop utilizing that word because of its association is just so very negative. So one way to do this is just to be able to catch yourself. Are you utilizing that word more during your day than you should? You know, catch yourself. Oh my gosh, you know, I say it to my kids all the time and they get defensive and then the arguments begin to start. So is there a way to go around it? Is there a way where, you know what, you didn't meet the expectation? What's going on? And what are we going to do next time to make sure you do meet this expectation? And it really, it takes away the anger, resentment. Yes, you know what? Ideally, I would have been here at 8:30. However, this happened and this happened. My child was sick. I had to get another backup babysitter. So yes, you know what? I apologize. Definitely will try to make this not happen again. And ideally, I would have been here. That was my goal. Find 10 chances during the day to repeat your chosen words. Now, ideally is one word that you can use. I like to use the word, you know, if something is not met, I always open it up with, hey, what's going on? This was the expectation that I thought we agreed on, and let me know if, you know, I was wrong, or, and then open the door so that they have the ability to either save face, like, yeah, you know what, that's right, and my fault, my bad, you know what, I forgot, or I was focused on other things, but it just allows opportunities for that conversation not to stop, not to turn into a major conflict, and it allows the opportunity to keep the door open to get that conversation or problem moved forward. I think we're really bad with our own family members, our spouses and the kids and that stuff. And so hopefully we're not as bad with it at work, but I know it's a trap that many of us, including myself, fall into on those days when we are frustrated. You know, the good days and the bad, we're going to have them, and maybe on our bad days we should on people a little bit more than we should. And last thing I want to do is, if I'm having a bad day, is to bring somebody else down and impact their day negatively. Last thing I want to do. Last thing I want to do is to walk away from a conversation and know that I have caused harm when that is not what my intent should ever be as a leader. Last thing I want to do. First thing in my control is knowing when I'm having that bad day and when I need to figure out how to shake it so that I am not contaminating others with it. That is the first thing I need to recognize. Practicing it is, again, something with communication, with this paradox, with active listening, everything. Creating a new habit is something that is going to be vital, but it doesn't happen over time. You've been doing what you've been doing and communicating the way you've been communicating for so very long. It does take a while to create that new habit. So practice it daily if you can, and just knowing when you do it well, do more of it, knowing when you're not doing it well, to jump out of that situation and jump out of it before it gets worse. All right. And so you can also listen for that word in conversations. Try to coach people through it if you can. And but other than that, just trying to stay away from it as much as possible and learning how to substitute with other words or phrases is going to be key. So we've covered a lot of information in this short period of time. And so 45 minutes of talking about communication is really a lot. And so again, with our training and our walkaways, we want to make sure we're focusing on what stood out to you. You know, what is it that one thing that you could start doing that is new to you? One thing that we've talked about or we've said today that you had an aha moment about. What is it that you could start doing that is new? What is it that you heard today that you just said, oh my gosh, I so do that and I really need to stop doing that? And that's one thing that you're going to work on stopping to do, which might be damaging your communication or getting in the way of effective communication. And then I guarantee you guys, so many of you are doing a lot of good things when it comes to communication. Probably that 80-20 rule. 80% of your communications are going well, and 20% might not be going well. We get hung up in that 20%. I know you could grow that 80 to 85 or 90%, and that's what you want to know. That's what you want to go on that path with. So think about during your day. Don't just walk away from situations that have gone bad and perseverate and blow those up in your head. Walk away from conversations that have gone good and concentrate on, you know, what did I do well? Why did this conversation work out? And do more of that. Reflect on that. Understand that. And make that your focus. And keep doing some more of that. So start, stop, and keep. And remember, good days and bad days. Remember, some days communication, resolution, problem-solving, teamwork is going to come a little bit easier to you. Some days we're going to struggle, and that's all right. It's just recognizing when those some days are to try to jump off of that platform sooner than later. You know, dig yourself out or get out of the quicksand faster, because on those some days, they are the days that just drag. They are the days that we bring down ourselves and we bring down others. So on those bad days, let's make it not about the day. Let's make it about a few hours and realizing it and turning that bad day around to be a positive day, to have positive intent, positive impact. And again, to realize that our goal with any communication is to cause no harm. And it is to make sure we are all in this together. We're working together. And the last thing I want to do in my communication is to cause harm and to have a negative impact on people that I'm working with, that I'm teaching, that I'm coaching, and that I'm leading. And so therefore, I hope that same philosophy holds true with you. And again, in closing, those are the things that are in your control. And as a leader, again, that is where we reflect, not in what's not in your control, not in what other people are doing, but in the internal process of recognizing what is in my control and what can I do about it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today and listening to our session on communication. We do have many resources in your participants workbook, which will give you some additional reading material when it comes to effective leadership and effective communication. So I do want you to be able to utilize those resources. Today is a good starting ground, but what are you going to do next? And how is it you can grow your knowledge base in regards to communication to a higher level and to be more effective? So that is what I challenge you with today. Start, stop, and keep, and then also go to that participants workbook and check out some of those resources in the back when it comes to books and articles on communication. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great day. Stay strong in your leadership path, and remember what's in your control. Thank you very much.